I woke up that morning and found my entire pension account emptied. $92,000. Gone. The name on the transfer? My daughter. A few hours later, my neighbour sent me a picture. Sophie, her husband, and his mother, laughing on a luxury cruise I paid for. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just made myself a cup of tea and wrote one sentence. My daughter is alive, but the mother in me died today. Before I tell you how I got every dollar and my dignity back, take a moment to subscribe, like, and share this story. It helps me bring you more real stories about betrayal, justice, and the kind of strength only life can teach. Now, let me tell you how a quiet woman brought a storm to the sea. That morning, the sea was calm, but my world wasn't. The waves outside my window rolled softly against the sand, the same way they had for years. I made my usual cup of instant coffee, sat in my little kitchen by the window, and opened the banking app on my phone. At first, I thought it was a mistake. The number stared back at me in black and white. Available balance, $0 to dollars. I blinked, refreshed the screen, checked again, still zero. My hands started trembling, not from age, but from something deeper, heavier. The kind of trembling that begins in the stomach, crawls up the spine, and settles right behind the eyes. I called the bank. The robot voice greeted me politely. Then a woman came on the line. "Ma'am, all the funds were transferred this morning," she said, "to an account under the name Sophie Whitman." I froze. That was my daughter's married name. For a few seconds there was nothing, no air, no sound. Just the hum of the old refrigerator behind me and the cry of a seagull outside my window. "Are you sure?" I whispered. The woman hesitated, her tone changing from professional to cautious. "Yes, ma'am. Would you like to file a fraud report?" Fraud. That word cut through me like a blade. I hung up without answering. My body moved on its own. I walked to the sink, turned off the kettle that had started to scream, and sat back down. The smell of burned coffee filled the air. For a while I didn't move. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. I thought about every shift I'd worked in the hospital, the night shifts, the double weekends, the holidays spent cleaning bedpans and holding dying hands, all for that pension, all for my daughter. The phone buzzed again, a message from my neighbour, Linda. "Marianne, you won't believe this. Sophie posted something, look." She sent me a picture. My daughter, my only child, standing on the deck of a luxury cruise ship, wind in her hair, a glass of champagne in her hand. Beside her, her husband Michael, and his mother, Mrs. Whitman, the woman who never even looked me in the eye. They were laughing. The caption read, "New beginnings, we deserve this." And in the comments, someone wrote, "You're living the dream." Sophie replied with a heart emoji. I stared at that photo until my eyes burned. Then I set the phone down. There are two kinds of silence in life, the one that comforts you and the one that buries you. That morning, mine buried me. I stood up, walked to the cabinet, and took out the small tin box where I kept old photos. There she was, Sophie, 5 years old, missing a tooth, holding a paper star she made for me in kindergarten. She used to say, "One day, Mama, I'll make you proud." And she did, until she didn't. I sat down on the floor and laughed. Not a real laugh, the dry, broken kind that sounds like glass cracking. I thought of the promises I'd made her when her father left. "You'll never go hungry. You'll have everything I didn't." And I had kept those promises. I'd worked until my back gave out, until my bones screamed at me to stop. For what? So she could take it all without even leaving a note? Outside, the sun was shining. The world kept spinning, the ocean kept moving. Only I had stopped. Hours passed before I realized I was still sitting in the same spot. The shadows stretched across the floor, the light turned gold, and I finally stood up. I made myself a cup of tea, chamomile, the kind Sophie used to drink when she couldn't sleep as a teenager. I held the mug close to my face and whispered, "My daughter is alive, but the mother in me died today." And I meant it, because in that moment, something inside me broke cleanly. No screaming, no tears, just a clean, silent fracture between love and survival. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment my revenge began. That night, I didn't sleep. The house made sounds I'd never noticed before, the pipes groaning, the clock ticking like a heartbeat I didn't want to hear. Every corner of that little home held a memory, and every memory hurt. I kept seeing her face in that photo, Sophie with her golden hair and that perfect smile she learned from her father, the same father who left us when she was 5, walking out the door with a suitcase and a promise, "It's not goodbye, it's just for now." That for now became forever. Back then, we lived in a 2-room apartment above a laundromat in Jacksonville. The air always smelled of detergent and metal. I worked double shifts at St. Mary's Hospital, mornings as a nurse's aide, nights cleaning operating rooms. There were days I came home with my uniform stiff from sweat and bleach. But Sophie didn't mind. She'd run to me, arms open, yelling, "Mama, you smell like soap and safety." That was my heaven, a little girl who thought poverty was perfume. When she was 8, she told me she wanted to be a doctor, so you don't have to clean after them anymore. I laughed, kissed her forehead and told her, "Then you better study hard, baby. Doctors don't cry when they get blood on their shoes." She nodded like she already understood the world. I saved every penny I could. I gave up new shoes, sold my wedding ring, and skipped dinner more times than I could count. Every dollar went to Sophie's future, her school, her books, her dreams. By the time she turned 18, I had managed to put away almost $40,000, all from cleaning rooms and changing sheets. That money became the down payment for her college tuition at Florida State. The day I dropped her off at the dorms, she hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "I'll make you proud, Mama," she said. "You already did, honey," I whispered back. But somewhere between that hug and the next visit, something changed. She stopped answering my calls right away. Then she started correcting the way I talked. "It's not fixin' to, Mom. People don't say that." When I brought her homemade pies for her dorm, she said, "You didn't have to, Mom. It's kind of embarrassing." Embarrassing. That word stuck to me like tar. The next time I visited, she introduced me to her new boyfriend, Michael, clean-cut, confident, from a good family, as she said. His mother, Mrs. Whitman, owned a boutique and carried herself like a queen who'd never washed a dish in her life. When she shook my hand, her smile was tight and polite, but her eyes, they looked at me like I'd tracked dirt into her clean white world. After that day, I stopped hearing from Sophie as much. The calls turned into texts. The texts turned into silence. I tried to tell myself it was just life. Children grow, mothers wait. But deep down I knew something was shifting, slowly, like sand slipping away beneath my feet. One night, while folding the laundry, I found the birthday card she'd sent me the year before. It said, "To the best mom in the world, you made me who I am." I read it over and over again until the words blurred. Because if that were true, then what kind of mother makes a thief? The distance didn't happen overnight. It was small things at first, her forgetting to call on Sundays, skipping Christmas because Michael's family had plans. Then, one day, she called and said she was getting married. In a private ceremony, just family. I was family, but apparently not the right kind. "Mom, it's going to be small, really simple. Don't feel bad, okay?" "Where is it?" I asked. "Up in Savannah. Michael's parents are hosting it at their lake house." I wasn't invited. I watched the photos on social media instead. My daughter in white lace, Mrs. Whitman beside her, holding her bouquet. Someone commented, "You look just like your mother." And Sophie replied, "Thank you. She's everything I hope to be." I didn't know which mother she meant anymore. A month later, she finally visited. She wore a silk blouse, high heels, and perfume that didn't belong to this house. Her eyes moved around the living room like she was inspecting an old motel. "You should think about selling this place, Mom," she said. "It's too close to the shore. You know how hurricanes are." I looked out the window. The sea was calm that day, soft waves touching the sand. "This house kept me alive," I said. "I'll die in it if I have to." She smiled politely. the kind of smile people give when they're waiting for you to finish talking. Then she changed the subject. Michael's investing in a new property. He says you could make great returns if you... No, Sophie, I'm not putting my money in anyone's hands but mine. She went quiet. Her tone hardened. You never trust anyone. That's why you've always been stuck. Those words hit harder than any slap could. I wanted to tell her that trust was a luxury people like me couldn't afford, that I'd trusted her father once, and it cost me half my life. But I didn't. I just nodded and said, "Maybe you're right, baby." When she left, I sat on the porch and listened to the ocean. I realized I couldn't remember the last time she called me mama. Now it was always mom, clean, distant, polite, like she was talking to a stranger at a bank counter. Still, I never stopped loving her. I sent cards on her birthdays, money for her anniversaries, and little gifts she never acknowledged. I told myself it didn't matter. Love isn't a transaction. But deep down, I could feel something dying, quietly, like a candle running out of wax. One night, a storm rolled in from the Gulf. The power went out, and I lit an old candle, the same one Sophie made for me in middle school, scented with vanilla and lavender. It burned unevenly, dripping wax onto my fingers, and for the first time in years, I cried. Not for the money, not for the distance, but for the truth I could no longer avoid. The girl who once smelled like soap and safety was gone. By the time the storm passed, the candle had burned to nothing. The wax had hardened around my hands, and so had my heart. Silence has a sound. It's not peace, it's pressure. It hums inside your ears until you start hearing things that aren't there. That's what my house felt like after Sophie stopped calling. Days turned into weeks, and the only voices were the seagulls and the weatherman. The phone stayed quiet, except for telemarketers who still thought I had money to spend. I didn't answer any of them. I just sat by the window every morning, watching the ocean move in slow, endless rhythm. It never rushed. It just waited. And I started doing the same. I kept a notebook on the table, the one with a sunflower on the cover Sophie gave me when she was 10. I opened it again for the first time in years. Instead of recipes and grocery lists, I began writing numbers, dates, bank transactions, the small withdrawals I hadn't noticed before. The handwriting shook a little, but my mind didn't. Pain has a way of sharpening what age tries to dull. Sometimes my neighbour Linda would knock and ask if I was okay. "You've been quiet lately, Marianne. You need some company?" I'd smile. "No, honey, I'm just learning to listen again." She thought I meant listening to the waves. I didn't. I was listening to the truth behind every lie my daughter had told me in the past year. The excuses, the delays, the words "trust me" that now sounded like "fool me." Every night I cooked a small meal, just enough for one. The radio played soft jazz, the kind that fills space without saying much. I'd eat slowly, wash my single plate, and sit back down to write in the notebook. By the end of the week, I had pages of data, a pattern of withdrawals, transfers, and deposits that didn't belong to me. I brought the notes to the local credit union and asked the teller to explain a few things. She clicked around on her computer, frowning. "Looks like someone's been accessing your online account, Mrs. Clark, probably from another device. Can you see whose name it's linked to? It's registered under a secondary authorized user. Do you recognize this name?" She turned the screen toward me. It said Michael Whitman. I thanked her and left. My legs felt weak, but not from shock anymore, from confirmation. When I got home, I didn't scream, didn't curse, didn't call anyone. I just opened the window and let the ocean air in. The sound of the waves came and went, steady, patient. That night, I wrote one sentence in the notebook. I gave them my trust once. They won't get my silence for free. Then I closed the cover, turned off the lights, and sat in the dark, not afraid, not defeated, just waiting. Because I finally understood something I'd been too soft to accept all my life. When a mother stops talking, it isn't surrender, it's strategy. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The sky outside was pale blue, the kind that looks like it hasn't decided whether to be day or night. I sat on the porch with my coffee, notebook in hand, and listened to the waves crash against the shore. The sea doesn't rage all the time. Sometimes it just whispers, waiting for the right moment to strike. That's exactly how I felt. I flipped through my notes again, line by line, like a detective learning my own story. Each transaction, each forged signature, all of it painted a clear picture. They had been draining me little by little, long before that final transfer. Not a robbery. A slow bleed. I didn't call the police, not yet. I needed someone who understood the system better than I did, someone who knew how to move quietly. That's when I thought of Henry Doyle. He was my neighbour back when Sophie was still in middle school. A widower, retired accountant, kind but sharp as a blade when it came to numbers. He used to bring his dog by and talk about taxes I never understood. I hadn't seen him in years, but I remembered his voice, steady, calm, like a man who never raised it unless absolutely necessary. I found his number written on an old Christmas card. My hands trembled as I dialed. "Henry Doyle," a voice answered. "Henry, it's Marianne Clark from Sandpiper Street." A pause, then warmth. "Marianne, well, I'll be damned. How long has it been? 10 years? "About that," I said softly. "I need your help, Henry. But I'd rather not talk about it on the phone." We met that evening at a small diner by the boardwalk. He looked older, greyer, but the eyes were still the same, sharp, kind, and too honest to pretend not to notice pain. I slid the notebook across the table. He read silently for a while, flipping through pages, tracing his finger along the numbers. Then he looked up. "You're telling me your daughter and her husband have been accessing your accounts?" "Yes." "And you didn't give them permission?" "I gave them my love," I said. "Turns out that was enough." Henry sighed and leaned back. "They forged your digital signature, Marianne. This isn't just betrayal, it's a federal crime, elder financial exploitation." The words felt heavy but satisfying, like hearing the diagnosis you already knew but needed someone else to confirm. "What do I do?" I asked. "You gather everything," he said. "Statements, emails, screenshots, messages. You document it all. Don't confront them yet. People like that, they don't confess. They collapse." I nodded. He looked at me for a long moment, then added, "You're awfully calm for someone who's been robbed blind." I smiled, but there was no humour in it. When you've cried every tear there is, calm is all that's left. We talked until the diner closed. He promised to help me file the report quietly, through the right channels. Before I left, he said, "You know, Marianne, silence used to be your weakness. Now it's your weapon." I walked home under the streetlights, their glow trembling in the ocean breeze. For the first time in months, my steps felt steady. That night, I didn't pray for peace. I prayed for patience, because I finally understood that vengeance, like the tide, always comes back to shore. A week passed before I heard back from Henry. I'd been waiting by the phone every morning, not because I was impatient, but because silence without purpose feels too much like dying. When his call finally came, it was short. "Marianne, I found something. Can you come by my office tomorrow?" His office was just a room above his garage, filled with paper stacks, old coffee mugs, and a dusty window that looked out to the street. He greeted me with that same calm face he'd always had, half accountant, half priest. He motioned for me to sit down. Then he spread several sheets of paper across the desk, bank statements, loan forms, and a copy of something that made my chest tighten. It was a joint account authorization form with my name, my social security number, and my signature at the bottom. Only one problem, I never signed it. "They forged your signature," Henry said quietly. "This was done digitally, but I cross-checked the pattern. Whoever did it copied an old signature from a hospital insurance form, probably one your daughter had access to." I stared at the paper. My name, The name I'd written 1,000 times for honest reasons, now turned into a weapon against me. Can they just do that? I asked. Not legally, but people do illegal things every day. What matters is we can prove it. He pulled out a folder, thicker, heavier. This isn't just the joint account. They used it to move money from your retirement fund, then into a shell account registered under Michael Whitman's consulting business. He doesn't have a business, I said. No, Henry replied. He has a cover. For a long time, I didn't say a word. The papers in front of me looked like a map, every dotted line, every forged signature leading to the same truth. They hadn't made a mistake. They had made a plan. Henry leaned forward. Marianne, I can file a report to the state attorney's office under elder financial exploitation. It'll trigger a temporary freeze on all linked accounts, including theirs. Do it, I said. He blinked. You sure you're ready for that? Once we do, there's no taking it back. They took everything from me, Henry. The least I can do is take back my name. He nodded. Then I'll need your ID, your retirement records, and the last 5 years of statements. I handed him a folder I'd already prepared, every document, every note, every printout. He smiled slightly. You've been busy. When you stop crying, you start organizing. We worked in silence for the next hour, him typing slowly, me reading every line like it was a prayer. When he was done, he slid the printed form across the desk for me to sign. This time, my hand didn't shake. Afterward, I stood by the window and looked outside. A couple of kids rode their bikes down the street, laughing, free of consequence. And for a brief moment, I remembered Sophie at that age, barefoot, chasing waves, hair tangled with salt and sunlight. I used to think that girl could do no wrong. Henry, I said quietly, what happens now? Now, he said, leaning back. We wait for the tide to turn. I left his house just before sunset. The air smelled like rain and gasoline. The sky had turned a deep shade of pink, the colour of endings and warnings. When I reached home, I brewed a cup of chamomile tea and sat on the porch, watching the first drops hit the railing. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't in years. Not peace, but clarity. The kind that hurts before it heals. I looked at the notebook on my lap, opened to a clean page, and wrote, They wanted my silence. I'll give them noise they can't hear, the kind that moves through courts, not screams. The rain began to pour, steady and unbothered, and as it hit the sea, I whispered, Let them enjoy their calm ocean. You and I know storms don't ask for permission. 3 days later, Henry called again. It's done, he said. The report's been filed. The state attorney's office accepted the documentation. You'll get a confirmation letter by next week. His tone was steady, almost casual, but I could hear it, the faint crackle of something coming alive. Justice doesn't roar. It hums, quietly, like the engine of a boat before it leaves the dock. That afternoon, I went to the post office to sign the official affidavit. The clerk, a young man with sleepy eyes, looked at the papers and then at me. You're pressing charges against your daughter? He asked, too curious for his own good. No, I said. I'm pressing pause on being her victim. He didn't ask again. When I got home, the air felt different. The ocean wind had changed direction, warmer, heavier. There's a saying old sailors used to tell me when I worked part-time cleaning boats, when the wind shifts at dusk, something's coming. That night, something did. I was watching the evening news when my phone buzzed. It was an email notification from my bank. Suspicious activity detected. Temporary freeze applied to all joint accounts. I almost smiled. Almost. The next message came 20 minutes later, from Sophie. Mom, what's going on? The bank says the account is frozen. We can't access anything. Please call me ASAP. I stared at her message for a long time, the way a person stares at a door they know they'll never open again. Then I put the phone face down on the table and let it ring when she called. The voicemail she left was frantic. Mom, did you Did you do something? We're on the cruise. And they're saying the cards aren't working. Michael's furious. Please, just tell me what's happening. Her voice cracked near the end, somewhere between fear and disbelief. The kind of sound a child makes when they realize the rules have changed. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my notebook and wrote, "The sea always takes back what it lends." The next day, Henry came by with coffee and paperwork. "You've officially triggered a fraud review," he said. Meaning? Meaning the funds in their accounts are now under federal supervision. They'll be questioned once they return to US soil. He took a sip of coffee, studying me. "You're awfully calm about this, Marianne." "Calm is what comes after heartbreak, Henry. There's nothing left to shake." He nodded slowly, like he understood. Later that night, I stepped outside. The moonlight spread across the ocean like silver paint. Somewhere out there, maybe hundreds of miles away, my daughter was standing on a luxury deck, watching the same sky. And for the first time in a long time, we were connected again, not by love, but by consequence. I closed my eyes and whispered into the wind, "You can buy a ticket to paradise, Sophie, but you can't outrun the tide." The next morning, I went through the motions of normal life, watering the plants, sweeping the porch, feeding the stray cat that came by every day. But everything felt sharper, clearer, like the world had shifted a few inches to the right. Midday, the phone rang again. "Henry." "You might want to sit down for this," he said. "Why?" "The Financial Crimes Unit contacted me. The cruise company flagged a transaction from your daughter's account, a wire attempt to Spain. They froze it mid-transfer." I let out a slow breath. Not joy, not relief, just acknowledgement, like a soldier nodding after hearing the first cannon fire. "They're panicking," Henry continued, "and that's good. Panic makes people sloppy. Sloppy makes them traceable." That night, I didn't celebrate. I didn't even smile. I just turned off the lights, stood by the window, and watched the ocean. In the distance, thunder rolled, faint but certain. It wasn't a storm yet, but it was coming, and I was ready. 3 days passed. I didn't turn on the TV, didn't open my phone. I just listened. To the ocean, to the wind, to the slow unraveling of something I couldn't see but could feel. Because silence, once it takes root, starts echoing in other places too. Henry dropped by that evening with a folder under his arm. "They confirmed the freeze," he said. "All linked accounts, including the Shell one in Michael's name, are locked pending investigation." "Good," I said quietly. He looked at me for a moment before adding, "You know, this could take weeks." "That's fine," I said. "I've been waiting my whole life to be heard. A few weeks won't hurt." He smiled, a little uneasy, like he wasn't sure if I was joking. But I wasn't. That night, the wind picked up outside. It howled through the cracks of my window, carried the smell of salt and rain, and I thought to myself, storms don't announce their arrival. They just build quietly until they're undeniable. Meanwhile, somewhere in the middle of the Caribbean, Sophie's storm had already started. From what I'd later learn, it began at breakfast. The waiters refused to charge their cabin to a card that had been declined twice. Then the cruise concierge came knocking, polite but firm. "Mrs. Whitman, your account seems to have been flagged for financial irregularities. We'll need an alternative form of payment." Michael laughed it off at first. "That's impossible. Run it again." They did. Same result. By lunch, Sophie's phone was buzzing non-stop. Bank emails, frozen transactions, fraud alert notifications stacking like a wall of panic. She called me again and again. By the 5th missed call, she left another voicemail. "Mom, this isn't funny. They're saying the account was reported for elder abuse or something. Are you listening to me? They're treating us like criminals." I sat by the window with my tea, listening to her voice shake. It didn't make me smile. It didn't make me cry. It just evened something inside me, because sometimes justice isn't a gavel or a courtroom. It's a voice you used to love, finally realizing what silence sounds like. That night, I walked down to the pier. The waves were rough, the wind sharp. I stood there for a long time, watching the dark water roll in and out. Somewhere out there, a cruise ship glided under the same moonlight, and for the first time, I didn't feel small. I whispered to the sea, "You and I, we've both been taken for granted, but we always find our way back." When I got home, Henry had left me a message. Update: the federal liaison contacted the cruise line. They're cooperating. They've been asked to hold the Whitmans for questioning upon docking. Hold them. I rolled that phrase around in my head. Soft, deliberate. I didn't want revenge that screamed. I wanted justice that whispered in boardrooms and froze accounts without warning. I opened my notebook and wrote a new line. I don't chase thieves, I build storms. By the next morning, I started getting calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Lawyers, reporters, insurance agents asking if I wished to comment. I said nothing. People underestimate silence. They mistake it for weakness. But silence is how you make others fill in their own guilt. I kept my days simple. Morning tea, porch sweeping, evening walks, every action deliberate, every breath steady, and every night, when the sun sank behind the water, I felt it. The balance slowly shifting, the tide turning inch by inch. It wasn't satisfaction yet, just symmetry. 2 days later, Henry came by again. He looked both excited and nervous. "You might want to sit down, Marianne." "Why?" "Your daughter's cruise was detained at port. Customs flagged her husband's financial transfers as suspicious. The bank filed an international inquiry. They're not under arrest yet, but they're being held for questioning." I took a slow sip of my tea. The chamomile had gone cold, but I didn't mind. "Held," I repeated. "Good word." He nodded. "You've started something big. The system moves slowly, but it's moving." I leaned back, eyes on the sea through my kitchen window. "Let it move, Henry. The ocean doesn't rush either." That night, I didn't write anything in my notebook. I just opened it to the last page and drew a single line, a wave, curling, rising, ready, because the revenge wasn't done. It was only beginning to crest. The morning it happened, the sky over Florida was the color of pewter, heavy, flat, waiting. I woke up before dawn, made a cup of coffee, and sat on the porch. The air smelled like rain and salt. It felt like the world was holding its breath. By the time the sun rose, I had the feeling, that quiet instinct mothers get when something is about to shift. And I was right. At 8:47 a.m., my phone rang. Not from Sophie, from Henry. His voice was tight, almost trembling. "Marianne, you might want to hear this from me before you see it on the news." "What's wrong?" "The Whitman's cruise ship. It's been detained off the coast of Puerto Rico. There's an active investigation for international financial misconduct." I didn't answer right away. I just looked at the ocean stretching in front of me. Calm, endless, unbothered. "They're all right," Henry added quickly. "No one's hurt, but they're under questioning. The bank records linked them to fraudulent transfers across state lines." I let out a slow breath. Not relief, not joy, just balance. "How long will they be held?" I asked. "Until they can prove where the money came from. Then they'll be there a while." Later that day, the first photos surfaced online. Blurry images from the dock. Sophie in sunglasses, trying to hide her face. Michael walking ahead, jaw tight. Mrs. Whitman yelling at someone, her manicured hand pointing like a blade. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize my daughter. She looked smaller, not physically, but in spirit. That night, she called. I didn't plan to answer, but I did. Her voice came through the line, trembling. "Mom, please, I don't know what's happening. They froze everything, the accounts, the credit cards. They're saying I'm under investigation. I swear I didn't mean..." "Didn't mean to what?" I asked softly. "I thought Michael handled everything. He said you agreed that it was part of your plan." I stayed quiet. The silence stretched between us like a rip in the earth. Then she whispered, "Mom, please, I'm scared." And for a second, just 1 second, my heart cracked. The same way it did the day she was born, when she first cried in my arms. But then I remembered, I had cried enough for both of us already. "You should be," I said. "Mom, I warned you once. You took from me thinking I wouldn't take it back. But the thing about storms, Sophie, is they don't ask who gets wet. She sobbed quietly. Then the line went dead. Henry stopped by the next morning with a look I'd never seen before, half respect, half awe. You've set something in motion, Marianne, he said. The authorities found evidence of forged documents, tax evasion, and identity misuse. They'll have to face it now, every bit of it. And you? I asked. What happens to me? You're clear. You're the victim here. In fact, they'll probably issue you a recovery payment once the case settles. I smiled faintly. Money isn't the point, Henry. I know, he said. But still, it's something. He paused before leaving. Most people would have screamed or begged or made a scene. You let the system do the screaming for you. Screaming never got me anywhere, I said. But silence? Silence moves mountains. After he left, I walked down to the shore. The waves were rougher that morning, the sea clawing at the sand, pulling it back only to crash again. I thought about Sophie, about how every act of cruelty she'd justified as ambition had finally come back to her, carried by her own reflection. I picked up a small seashell, cracked and hollow, held it in my palm and whispered, "This is what greed sounds like when it's empty." That night, the phone rang again. A new voice this time, a man. "Mrs. Clark, this is Agent Morales from the Federal Financial Bureau. We've concluded the initial investigation. Would you be willing to provide a statement?" "Yes," I said. "I've been silent long enough." He thanked me and scheduled a visit for the following week. Before hanging up, he added, "Ma'am, between us, not many people stand up to their own family. I admire your courage." "It's not courage, Agent," I said. "It's motherhood. We fight differently. We don't swing, we endure." When the call ended, I looked out at the horizon, the faint glow of lightning flashing miles away. The storm was still out there, rolling, turning. But it wasn't mine anymore. For the first time since this began, I felt something close to peace, the kind that doesn't come from winning, but from surviving long enough to see justice do the rest. I went to bed with the window open. The ocean hummed low and steady, like a lullaby written for the broken. And before I drifted to sleep, I whispered into the dark, "Sleep well, Sophie. The tide has your name now." The week after the storm, the air felt heavier, like the ocean itself was holding its breath. I spent most mornings on the porch, notebook in hand, not writing, just listening. There's a sound the sea makes after a storm passes. It isn't loud, but it carries weight, like the world remembering what it just survived. That's what my life felt like now, quiet, but changed. Henry came by with a newspaper under his arm. He didn't say a word at first, just handed it to me. Front page headline, "Whitman family under federal investigation for financial fraud." Their faces were blurred, but I knew those silhouettes, the set of her shoulders, the tilt of his chin. "It's official," Henry said softly. "The federal charges are in motion. They'll be back on US soil within 72 hours. I folded the paper neatly and placed it beside my cup of tea. What happens now? They'll be questioned, processed, and their assets will stay frozen until the audit's complete. Good, I said. Let them feel what it's like to live on nothing. Henry hesitated before speaking again. You'll probably be asked to testify, Marianne. The investigators want a full statement. You can choose how much to tell. I'll tell the truth, I said, but not to hurt her. I'm done hurting. He smiled, small but proud. You've got more grace than most saints I've met. Grace isn't kindness, Henry. It's just mercy with boundaries. 2 days later, Agent Morales arrived at my home, a tall man in a dark suit, polite but focused. He set up a recorder on my kitchen table and said gently, Mrs. Clark, I just need you to walk me through everything from the moment you discovered the missing funds. I told him everything, the app, the bank call, the photograph, the forged forms Henry found. He didn't interrupt once, just nodded. occasionally writing notes. When I was done, he turned off the recorder. "I have to say, ma'am, most victims don't stay this composed." "That's because I stopped being a victim the moment I stopped screaming," I said. He chuckled quietly, then said something that stayed with me. "Justice is slow, Mrs. Clark, but it always arrives. It just hates noise." When he left, I sat alone at the table for a long while. The late afternoon light poured through the curtains, turning the steam from my tea into gold. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't waiting for revenge anymore. I was waiting for closure. That evening, the phone rang again, this time from an unknown number. I didn't answer at first, but something made me pick it up. A voice on the other end said, "Mrs. Clark, it's me." Sophie. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Her voice was smaller now, fragile. "They took Michael in for questioning. Mom, they said there's proof he forged everything. Your signature, the transfer requests, even the insurance claim. I didn't know. I swear I didn't." I stayed silent. There are moments in life when silence weighs more than any word. This was one of them. "He used me," she whispered. "He said it was an investment, that you agreed to help us start our business." I believed him. I closed my eyes. For years, I had imagined what I'd say if she ever admitted the truth. But now that it was here, there was nothing left to say. "What do I do, Mom?" she asked through tears. "You tell the truth," I said quietly. "All of it, even the parts that make you look bad. Will they arrest me? I don't know, but lying will kill you faster than prison ever could." There was a pause, the sound of her crying, soft and broken. "Mom, I'm sorry." For a moment, I wanted to believe she meant it. But forgiveness, I'd learned, isn't a word you say once. It's a language you have to speak for the rest of your life. "We'll see, Sophie," I said softly. "We'll see." When the call ended, I set the phone down and exhaled. The wind outside had picked up again. The ocean roared like thunder far away, but the house stood steady. So did I. I poured another cup of tea and sat back in my chair. Justice wasn't fast, but it was patient, just like me. 2 weeks later, Henry drove me downtown to the courthouse. It wasn't for a trial, not yet. Just the formal hearing, the one where the truth begins to crawl out from under the rug. The hallways smelled like paper, coffee and fear, 3 things justice feeds on. I sat in the back row, hands folded, eyes steady. Sophie was already there, sitting at the table with her public attorney. She looked different. Her hair tied back, face pale, the shine in her eyes replaced with something raw, humility maybe, or just exhaustion. Michael wasn't beside her. He sat at a separate table with his lawyer, his jaw clenched, every bit the man who'd built a life on control and finally lost it. And Mrs. Whitman, that proud woman with the designer scarves, wasn't in the room at all. She'd fainted earlier, they said, when she heard about the frozen accounts and tax evasion charges. I didn't smile, I just watched. The prosecutor laid everything out, the forged forms, the wire transfers, the false insurance documents. Each page felt like a piece of me being stitched back together. Not because I wanted them punished, but because the truth was finally speaking in my place. When it was my turn to stand, I walked to the witness stand slowly. Agent Morales nodded at me reassuringly. "Please state your name for the record." "Marianne Clark." My voice didn't shake. He asked me to describe how I discovered the theft. I told him, step by step, from the morning the numbers turned to 0 to the moment I heard Sophie's voice break on the phone. I didn't dramatize it, I didn't cry, I just told it the way it happened. Plain, clean, and true. When I finished, the judge thanked me. As I turned to step down, Sophie looked up at me, really looked, for the first time in years. Her lips trembled. "Mum," she whispered, but I kept walking. Some words don't belong in public places. Outside, the day was bright and cruelly beautiful, the kind of sky that refuses to match the gravity of what happens beneath it. Henry walked beside me in silence until we reached his car. "You did good," he said finally. I didn't do anything, I replied. The truth did. We drove back along the coast road. The sea glittered in the sunlight, as if nothing terrible had ever happened to it, as if it hadn't swallowed storms or secrets. And for the first time in months, I realized I wasn't carrying the weight anymore. It had gone where it belonged. That evening, Sophie called again. This time I answered. Her voice was soft, stripped bare. They released me, Mum. Michael's facing charges. I'm staying at a motel. You're alive, I said. That's enough for now. Mum, can I come home? The question hung in the air like smoke. For a moment, the word yes formed on my tongue, the reflex of every mother who ever loved too much. But then I saw the notebook on the table, the one filled with everything that had been taken, every scar written in ink. Not yet, I said quietly. Why? Because home isn't a place, Sophie. It's trust, and you haven't earned your way back there. She cried quietly. I understand. When the call ended, I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the ocean breathing beyond the walls. It sounded different now, not threatening, not broken, just steady, just true. A few days later, Henry stopped by with a manila envelope. The state ruled in your favor, he said, handing it to me. Inside were the recovery documents, authorization for restitution, and a letter from the bank confirming the reinstatement of my accounts. I ran my thumb over the embossed seal. Money had never mattered less. Still, I whispered a quiet thank you, not to the system, but to whatever force had kept me standing long enough to see this through. As Henry left, he turned at the gate and said, You finally got your justice, Marianne. I shook my head. No, Henry, justice got me. It found me when I stopped asking for mercy. That night, the sky was clear again. I sat on the porch, the same chair, the same view, but everything inside me had changed. The sea shimmered under the moonlight, endless and forgiving. I opened my notebook to the last blank page and wrote, Justice doesn't shout. It whispers through time, through consequence, through the silence we choose instead of hate. Then I closed it, set it aside, and let the sound of the ocean fill the space where pain used to live. Justice came and went quietly, like a tide that had done its job. No noise, no celebration, just still water and wreckage left behind. The papers said case closed, the accounts were restored, and the authorities called it a victory. But victories don't always feel like freedom. Sometimes they just feel like aftermath. For weeks, I tried to go back to ordinary life, grocery runs, laundry, my small garden out back. But everything ordinary had changed shape. The store clerk smiled at me differently now, like she knew my story. Neighbours stopped pretending they didn't gossip. Even the sea outside my window seemed quieter. Respectful maybe, or wary. I didn't care. The world could talk. I had peace, and peace was expensive. Then one morning, a letter arrived. No stamp. No return address. Just my name, written in handwriting I could have recognized blindfolded. Inside was a single folded page. The first line read, I don't expect forgiveness, Mom. I just want you to know I finally see it. It went on to describe how Michael had taken everything, not just the money, but the story. He'd told her lies, manipulated her into signing forms, and when the investigation began, he'd tried to shift the blame onto her. Now he was facing multiple charges, while she was left with debts, no home, and no one to call. The last line said, If you can't forgive me, at least remember that I'm still your daughter, and I'm still learning what that means. I folded the letter and sat with it in my lap. I should have felt something. Anger, sorrow, relief. Instead, I felt the same thing the ocean must feel after a storm. Tired. That night, I called Henry. He came over with soup and 2 cups of coffee, as he always did when words felt too heavy to say alone. I showed him the letter. He read it silently, then handed it back. You gonna reply? I don't know, I said. You don't have to. Some lessons finish themselves. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the waves hit the shore. Then he said, "You ever wonder what all this was for? I mean, you got your money back, your name cleared, but what did it really fix?" I looked out the window, the sea glimmering under the porch light. "It fixed the part of me that stopped believing in truth," I said, "but it broke the part of me that believed in family." He nodded slowly. "Sometimes they're the same part, Marianne." We didn't talk much after that. He left around midnight, and I stayed awake long after, watching the ocean shift under the moon. The tide was low, the sand dark and glistening, a mirror reflecting everything I didn't want to see. The next morning, I found another envelope at the door. This one had an address, a women's shelter in Tampa. It was from Sophie again, shorter this time. "They let me stay here for a few weeks. I'm working in the kitchen trying to get my life back. I wanted to send you the money I still had, but I figured you wouldn't take it. I'm not asking to come home. I just wanted you to know I'm trying. Love, Sophie." The word love felt foreign on the page, shaky, uncertain, but honest. And that, somehow, hurt more than all the lies before it. I put the letter in the drawer with the first one and whispered, "Keep trying, baby. That's all that ever mattered." But I didn't write back, not yet. Because forgiveness isn't a doorway you open once. It's a hallway you have to walk through, one step at a time and barefoot. That night, I sat on the porch again, my old rocking chair creaking in rhythm with the tide. The sea was calm, the air cool, and the stars spread like spilled salt across the sky. I closed my eyes and thought about Sophie as a little girl, her laughter, her bare feet chasing waves, her promise, "One day, Mama, I'll make you proud." And maybe, just maybe, this was the start of her keeping that promise, not in glory, not in wealth, but in humility. I smiled faintly and whispered, "We're getting there, my girl. Slowly, but we're getting there." It had been almost 6 months since the case closed when I saw her again. I was coming out of the grocery store carrying a paper bag full of peaches and tea bags, when I heard a voice behind me, small, careful. "Mom?" I froze. For a moment, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, but when I turned, there she was, thinner, paler, her hair tied back in a simple ponytail, no makeup, no jewelry, no mask, just my daughter, stripped down to the truth. She smiled faintly, like she wasn't sure she had the right to. "I didn't mean to scare you," she said softly. "I just wanted to see you." I looked at her for a long moment. The last time I'd seen that face was in a courtroom under fluorescent lights. Now, standing in the warm sunlight, she looked younger and older all at once, a woman who'd finally met herself. "You look well," I said. "I'm trying," she replied, "one day at a time." We walked to a bench outside the store. The breeze carried the smell of salt and summer, and for a minute, neither of us spoke. Sometimes silence is kinder than words. She was the first to break it. "I got a job," she said, "at a diner near the shelter. It's not much, but it's mine." "Good," I said. She nodded, picking at the hem of her sleeve. "I pay rent every week. I don't have a car yet, but there's a bus stop right outside." Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from honesty. Then she looked up. "Mum, I wanted to see you because I wanted to say thank you." That caught me off guard. For what? For letting me fall, for not saving me too soon. The words hit harder than any apology could have. I stared at her, and for the first time in years, I saw the girl I used to know, the one who smelled like soap and safety, who believed love could fix anything. I reached out and touched her hand. Her fingers were cold, calloused, but steady. "You're not there yet," I said, "but you're on your way. Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" I took a deep breath. The question didn't surprise me. It had been living between us for years. "Forgiveness isn't something I give, Sophie," I said. "It's something we build, brick by brick. You'll know when it's standing tall enough for both of us to lean on." She nodded, eyes glossy but not crying. "I'll keep building," she whispered. We sat there for a while, two women bound by blood and mistakes, letting the afternoon stretch around us. When she stood to leave, she hesitated. "Can I come by sometime? Maybe Sunday? I could make dinner." I thought of the house, the empty plates, the quiet rooms, the ghost of all that had been lost and found again, and I realized forgiveness doesn't mean erasing the past. It means setting a place for it at the table. "Sunday's fine," I said. Her smile broke through, small, shaky, but real. "Okay," she said. "I'll bring the groceries." When she walked away, I watched until she disappeared down the street. The wind shifted then, carrying the scent of peaches from my grocery bag, sweet, faint, alive. That night, I set 2 plates on the kitchen counter, out of habit more than hope. The house felt lighter somehow, like it was exhaling after holding its breath for too long. I opened my red notebook and wrote the last entry I would ever write in it. Some storms destroy everything, some just wash the salt off what was meant to stay. Then I closed the notebook and placed it in the drawer beside her letters. Outside, the sea was calm again, steady, forgiving. I stood by the window, watching the moonlight ripple across the water, and whispered, "We're both learning, Sophie, to fall, to rise, to forgive." And for the first time, I didn't feel alone. The days grew slower after Sophie came back into my life. Not dramatic, not loud, just slower, like the world had finally stopped spinning long enough for me to catch my breath. Every Sunday, she showed up at my door with a grocery bag in one hand and that same nervous smile in the other. The first time, she brought too much: steak, wine, a whole pie. By the third visit, she learned that what I wanted most was time, not food. We didn't talk about the past much. We talked about weather, recipes, the cat that kept sneaking into my garden. Sometimes we ate in silence. And in that silence, I felt something change. A bridge being built, one quiet plank at a time. One afternoon, we were washing dishes together when she asked, "Do you ever think about Dad?" It had been decades since I'd heard his name spoken aloud in that house. "Sometimes," I said, "mostly when I'm reminded that leaving can be the kindest thing a person ever does." She smiled sadly. "I think I inherited that from him, running when things get hard." "No," I said softly. "You just didn't know the difference between leaving and escaping. Now you do." She nodded, eyes on the soapy water. The late afternoon sun poured through the window, glinting off the bubbles. For a moment, I saw her as she once was, 5 years old, standing on a stool to help me rinse the dishes, her little hands covered in foam. Life has a way of circling back to its simplest form. Sometimes the healing doesn't come with apologies, it comes with shared silence and clean plates. A few weeks later, my doctor told me my heart wasn't doing well. He used words like weakened valves and irregular rhythm, but I heard something simpler underneath it all: time. Not the kind that could be measured in days or months, the kind you can feel running out quietly, like a candle reaching its end. I didn't tell Sophie right away, not because I wanted to hide it, but because I wanted to understand it myself first. When you've spent your whole life fighting for survival, for respect, for truth, it takes a while to learn how to rest. That night, I walked to the beach. The tide was low, the moon a soft coin hanging over the horizon. I sat on the sand and listened to the water whisper across the shore. It didn't sound angry anymore. Just endless, like forgiveness itself. I thought about all the versions of me that had lived and died in this lifetime. The young mother who scrubbed floors for a dream, the broken woman who cried over an empty account, the fighter who built her revenge in silence, and the survivor who finally let go. They were all me. But tonight, only one version remained, the one who could finally say, "It's enough." When I got home, I took out the red notebook from the drawer. The cover was worn, the edges curled from years of use. Inside, every line told a piece of my journey, every heartbreak, every plan, every truth. I turned to a blank page and wrote, "Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without bleeding." I closed it gently and placed it beside the photograph of Sophie as a child, the one where she's holding a seashell up to her ear, laughing like she could hear the ocean talking back. The next morning, I called her. "Come by tonight," I said. "I'll make your favorite soup." Her voice brightened instantly. "The one with the corn and thyme?" "The same," I said. "Bring the pie, but only if you baked it yourself." She laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in years, soft and alive. And for the first time, the laughter didn't echo against old wounds. It stayed, right there in the room, like sunlight that finally decided to linger. The night Sophie came for dinner, the air smelled like rain and rosemary. She brought a pie, still warm, and her nervous laugh filled the kitchen as she said, "Don't get excited, it's a little burnt." I smiled. So were most of my best meals. We ate at the small wooden table by the window, the one that had seen more silence than conversation over the years. The soup steamed gently between us. The pie sat untouched for a while. At one point, she reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers weren't cold this time. "You know," she said, "I thought healing would feel like forgetting, but it doesn't. It just feels lighter." "That's all healing ever is," I said, carrying the same load but learning where to set it down. She squeezed my hand. "You set it down long before I did." "Maybe," I said softly, "but you came back to help me lift it one last time." After she left that night, I stayed by the window long after the lights went out. The rain came quietly, tapping against the glass like fingers trying to say goodbye. And I knew, deep in that unspoken way mothers know, that this was the last calm night I would have. Not out of sadness, just knowing. In the days that followed, my body grew tired faster. The walks to the beach became shorter. The tea took longer to finish. Even the ocean outside seemed to move slower, as if matching my pace. So I began to prepare, not for death, for leaving well. I wrote letters, short ones, one for Henry, thanking him for being the kind of friend who never asked for anything, one for Linda, telling her to keep the cat even though it never really belonged to anyone, and one, of course, for Sophie. I wrote hers on a quiet afternoon when the house smelled of cinnamon and the sky looked soft enough to touch. The words came easy, like they'd been waiting their turn. "My dearest Sophie, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Don't cry. This isn't an ending. It's just a pause between tides. You and I have seen what storms can do. Now it's time to see what calm can rebuild. I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. Not when you left, not when you lied, not even when you forgot who I was. Because love, real love, isn't memory. It's forgiveness that stays after memory fades. Live gently, my girl. Be kind when no one's looking. And when the sea feels too heavy, remember, we were made of it. It knows our names." I folded the letter and placed it in the red notebook, the one that had seen everything. Then I set the notebook on the kitchen table beside a photo of her as a child. That night I slept deeply, no dreams, no pain, just the rhythm of the sea outside, like a mother rocking her child to rest. The next morning the sun rose soft and golden. The neighbours said they found me sitting in my chair, hands folded, eyes closed, a faint smile on my face. The red notebook lay open, the last line visible in my handwriting. "The tide is gentle today." Sophie came hours later. They said she knelt beside me, holding my hands, whispering things no one could hear. When she opened the notebook, the tears finally came, not from guilt, but from love that had nowhere else to go. She took the letter, pressed it to her chest, and whispered, "I hear you, Mom. I hear you." Then she walked to the shore that afternoon, the same beach where I had spent my life listening to the sea. The wind wrapped around her like a memory. She looked out at the horizon, waves glimmering under the sunlight, and whispered my words back to the ocean. "We were made of you. You know our names." And the tide rolled in, soft, forgiving, eternal. If this story touched your heart, don't let it fade. Somewhere out there, a mother is still waiting for her child to come home, and a child is still learning how to say I'm sorry. Share this story if you believe forgiveness can still find its way back. Leave a comment, tell me where you're listening from, and remember, every tide, no matter how rough, always returns to shore. This is Marianne's story. Thank you for hearing her truth.